Well, it's been 7 years since Apple released the iPhone 5 to the world, so I decided to go ahead and take a look at this particular iPhone in 2019. Let's get started, shall we? The design of the iPhone 5 is a drastic yet familiar departure from the previous generation devices. It replaced the glass back design from the iPhone 4 and 4S with a brushed aluminium design, including small strips of glass at the top and bottom. It's also thinner and lighter than those previous iPhones, with a thickness of 7.6mm and a weight of just 112 grams. By comparison, the older iPhone 4 has a thickness of 9.3mm and a weight of 137 grams. There were two colours brought along with this refreshed design of the iPhone 5, which were black and slate, a slightly darker version of the space grey colour used on newer iPhones, along with a white and silver variant as well. This design style was quite a staple with iPhones for a while, being reused on the iPhone 5S, as well as the newer iPhone SE. Interestingly, Apple would later return to the glass back design, starting with the iPhone 8 and 10, probably so they can incorporate wireless charging to them. Despite the petite size by today's standards, I'm personally quite a fan of the design style used on the iPhone 5, since it strikes a perfect balance of being comfortable to use in the hand while still retaining a premium build quality. Speaking of petite, one of the major upgrades that defines the iPhone 5 is the display. The 3.5-inch screen included on every iPhone before this was bumped up to a taller 4-inch screen here, with a resolution of 1136 by 640. The pixel density was retained here as well, keeping the same 326 pixels per inch used on the 4 and 4S. Since the display only got taller and not wider, there wasn't a major increase in the screen real estate compared to the older iPhones, but the one advantage this offered is that widescreen 16:9 content can fit the entire screen instead of needing black bars at the top and bottom. But let's be real here. Comparing this iPhone to today's smartphones, it looks pretty tiny. Even in 2012, phones with larger screens were starting to emerge, like the Samsung Galaxy S3 and HTC One X that were released in the same year, both including 4.7-inch displays. To put things into perspective, you can see here that this Galaxy S6 Edge Plus, released back in 2015, just dwarfs the iPhone in size. Apple would catch up eventually, with the release of the iPhone 6, which had a 4.7-inch display, and the iPhone 6 Plus, with a larger 5.5-inch display. Specs-wise, we're looking at a 1.4 GHz dual-core Apple A6 SoC, a single gigabyte of RAM, and this was offered in storage capacities of either 16, 32, or 64 gigabytes. The headphone jack was relocated from the top to the bottom with the speaker and microphone, next to what was the very first appearance of the Lightning connector on an Apple product. This dock connector was what replaced the older 30-pin connector used on many of their products as far back as the 3rd generation iPod. As well as being smaller, the Lightning port is reversible, allowing you to plug the connector into your device on any side you like. Back when this iPhone 5 was released in 2012, the dock connector replacement caused a lot of controversy among some people, since there were already a whole host of accessories out there that utilized the older 30-pin dock connector and would require a separate adapter to use those with the newer iPhone. Sound familiar? Anyways, fast forward 7 years later, and the Lightning port is pretty well established with Apple products nowadays, having been used on all of the iPhones, iPods, and iPads that followed from the iPhone 5. And there are a lot more accessories that use the Lightning connector. Although, as we've seen with the latest iPad Pros, the Lightning connector could potentially be phased out yet again in favour of the more widely common standard USB-C. Looking at the software side of the equation, the iPhone 5 originally debuted with iOS 6, which performed particularly well on it. This version of iOS was more or less a refinement on the previously released iOS 5, with things like support for FaceTime calling over cellular networks, an iTunes and App Store interface redesign, an addition of the Passbook app, and a panorama mode in the camera app, which we'll get onto later. But this version also brought along some more controversial additions, like the replacement from Google Maps to Apple Maps, along with the removal of the built-in YouTube app. Thankfully, as a result of this, Google went ahead and made their own versions of the Google Maps and YouTube apps for iOS. The latest release of iOS that this iPhone supports is 10.3.3, which certainly doesn't perform quickly on here, but it's still somewhat usable. Since this iPhone introduced a newer screen size, developers had to update their apps to fit the taller canvas, or else they would have letterboxing at the top and bottom of the screen. Focusing our attention to the camera on the iPhone 5. See what I did there? It retains the same 8 megapixel sensor used on the 4S, which was already a very decent camera for smartphones at the time. Apple claimed the newer SoC in this iPhone allowed for improved low-light performance and noise reduction from the camera, along with a 40% increase in the capture speed when taking photos. I mentioned earlier about the addition of the panorama mode in iOS 6, which was one of the aspects Apple focused on in the marketing for this iPhone. It allows you to take panoramic images of up to 28 megapixels in size from a variety of different directions. In the right conditions, you can get some great results using this mode, but it isn't always perfect. Stitching errors can occur if you aren't careful, and low-light panoramas can contain a lot of noise in the image. As you've probably come to expect from iPhones in the last few years, image quality from the iPhone 5 is very good. Whilst it certainly may not be on the same performance level of phones like the Pixel 3, iPhone XR and Galaxy S10, this camera is still a decent performer by today's standards. The dynamic range using default settings is not the best, but you do have an HDR mode available here, which can help bring out the highlights and shadows when taking photos in most situations. Low light performance is average at best, with a fair amount of detail being lost when taking photos in darker environments, along with a bit of noise showing up in the images too. It can get the job done in certain cases, but don't expect the same level of performance as newer smartphones like the Pixel 3 and 3a with their night sight camera mode. Video quality from the iPhone 5 is not bad considering its age, with a maximum recording resolution of 1080p at 30 frames a second. Like the Galaxy S4 I previously made a video on a while ago, optical image stabilization isn't available in the camera. You do get digital image stabilization though, which works fine for smoothing out the bumps and shakes when recording video. But don't expect Steadicam-like performance typically found in today's flagship smartphones. There was one aspect in the camera department that did get an upgrade here, which is the front-facing camera, with a bump up in the resolution from 0.9 megapixels on the iPhone 4 and 4S to 1.2 megapixels on the iPhone 5. This higher resolution meant you could also record videos at 720p instead of 640 by 480 on the older iPhones. The front-facing camera was certainly a nice improvement here, and the sensor itself was used in a lot of other iOS devices for a while. In fact, it's most likely the same one used on the recently released iPod Touch 7th generation, believe it or not. Media consumption on this iPhone is okay with its decent screen quality, but the smaller size of the screen could be a deal breaker for some people, in things like watching videos on it, for example. In the gaming performance department, the majority of 2D games run just fine on the iPhone 5. There's definitely some noticeable lag when playing more demanding games like Real Racing 3, but it's still playable for the most part. The speaker quality for the one found on the bottom of the phone is a bit lackluster, but it's not terrible either. It's nice that you don't need an adapter to use wired headphones, since this iPhone has a built-in 3.5mm headphone jack at the bottom, unlike many of the modern smartphones released today. With its taller screen size, improved front camera, and the addition of the Lightning connector, the iPhone 5 is a somewhat landmark device in the series, laying the groundwork for the modern iPhones that followed from it. A lot of you may know that the iPhone 5 was only on the market for a year, being replaced by the iPhone 5C in September 2013, alongside the flagship 5S. The former shared the same internals from the iPhone 5, but replaced the aluminium casing for a polycarbonate plastic shell, which came in a variety of colours. But still, the iPhone 5 remains a special part in the history of the series, and is definitely one of my favourite iterations of the iPhone. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos from me in the future. And of course you can follow me on my social networks like Twitter and Instagram for more updates from me in the future. So once again, hope you enjoyed this video on the iPhone 5. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye! To fit the taller canvas, or else they would have oh, there's an airplane. Aeroplane, we gotta wait for the aeroplane to go. That was weird, but no, seriously, we should probably wait for the aeroplane to go past. Okay, there we go. Oh, damn it. At 720p instead of 640 by 480 instead of 640 by 480 on the older iPhones. Right, we're just going to go with that. We're just going to go with that. Should be fine. Damn it. Couldn't get it in. Right, let me do it again.